Well, hello again, everyone. My name is Chris Rich. I'm the CEO and Executive Director for the National Celiac Association. It's hard to believe, but it's that time of year, again, when we start talking about back to school. I'm located in Ohio, and in my school district, kids are going back next week. I know the teacher here on our one of our panelists, she went back to school last week. So I know it seems early for me, but the time is now to start talking about the best way to prepare our kiddos for the school year. So I welcome all of you, and thank you for putting some time into your busy schedules to join us for tonight's event, which is called Steps for a Successful Back to School Experience. Um, a little about our organization for those who are just joining us for the first time. The National Celiac Association is a nonprofit organization who educates, advocates, and empowers individuals and families, as well as communities affected by celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivities. We've established over 70 support groups and resources in communities across the United States, which includes our Raising Our Celiac Kids program, otherwise known as ROC, that directly assists kids and their families. Other programs that we have include our Supporting Our Celiac Seniors, as well as our Feeding Gluten-Free program, which addresses food insecurities. You can find more information about these and our other programs on the newly revamped website at nationalceliac.org. So if I can have the slide advanced, please, we're going to go ahead and be able to thank our sponsor. We're able to provide tonight's webinar thanks to our sponsor, Little Northern Bakehouse. Everyone in attendance tonight will be entered into a drawing for one of 5 gift baskets that will be given to us, or given to you, I should say, by Little Northern Bakehouse. The winners are going to be announced here in the next couple of days. So good luck to you. And again, we thank Little Northern Bakehouse for their support. Some housekeeping items to talk about before we get started. A couple of things that aren't going to appear here on your screen. So we wanted tonight to be an equal, informative conversation, educational, but also kind of an informal chat. You're welcome to ask general questions through the Q&A feature. There's a box located on the bottom right of your Zoom screen. The chat button will be disabled for this event, so please ask us your questions through that Q&A tab. Tonight's format is going to include a short presentation featuring our panelists. Following that, the panelists will be addressing some of the questions that you've previously sent in, and then we'll be answering questions that you submit through that Q&A box during the course of the conversation. We have Carla and Stacy from our NCA team. They're behind the scenes right now. They're going to be answering questions as they come in, so hopefully we can address as many of these as we can. Closed captions also available by clicking on the CC button in the lower portion of your screen there. The discussion is also going to be recorded and available for viewing on our YouTube channel, which is YouTube at National Celiac Association. And on our website, we're going to have it there on Monday. So you'll be receiving an email from NCA that's going to include that link to the recording, as well as some other helpful resources that we're going to touch on during the course of this conversation. So you can look for that email to hit your inbox on Monday as well. So as you can see here, now referencing to the slide, we do have some expectations for this session. We want to answer your questions and provide what we can to establish a safe and welcoming learning environment for your students. We're going to touch on topics such as 504 plans, how to best prepare for the school day, tips for communicating with your teachers, and how to manage things outside the classroom, such as after-school activities and sports, etc. So before I introduce the panelists, I'm going to put a poll question up here to kind of just ask, what grade I should say, is your student going into this year? If you have more than one student, just select one. I don't have an option for multiple selections on this, but go ahead and select there your celiac students and which one they're going to go into. So there's the poll right there. So we'll go ahead and have a couple questions answered for everybody. I'll give you some time. Okay, so it looks like we have a lot of elementary school parents on here with some middle school and also some college, which is great to see as well. So that's awesome. I think the information we're going to share is going to be able to be helpful for everyone on here. So let's go ahead and introduce our 3 panelists who are going to be helping us during the course of the evening with our expectations. First things first, Toni Holland is a retired educator and school counselor from Florida. She has 28 years of experience in the school system. She was diagnosed with celiac disease 16 years ago, and she has helped children from elementary through high school with their 504 plans for celiac disease, as well as other disabilities that impact their learning. Valencia Robinson has been a dedicated teacher in Volusia County for 30 years, nurturing and educating countless students throughout her career. Her personal experiences as a parent have given her a deep understanding, as she has 4 children who all manage celiac disease. And so she has a good understanding of the challenges faced by families dealing with chronic health conditions. And that makes her a compassionate and empathetic educator. Our last finalist is Jennifer Scharf, I'm sorry, is a mother of 2 girls, ages 10 to 12. And when her 12-year-old was diagnosed with celiac disease in 4th grade, she was the only child in her class who had that diagnosis. So that was very isolating for her. And so the last 2 years, Jen's been gaining a lot of insight as to what's worked to ensure her daughter remains safe and feels included when it comes to both school and also travel sports. So I thank all of our panelists for being here. I'm going to ask Tony to go ahead and open her mic and join us via camera, as we're going to start off tonight by talking about 504 plans. We understand that some of you may not be familiar with what a 504 plan is. So we're going to start tonight's conversation by talking about the key benefits of a 504 and the steps to take to establish one for your student. So here you'll see defined what a 504 plan is. And basically, and I'll just read this, Section 504 is a federal civil rights law, or part of one, that prohibits discrimination against students with disabilities and ensures them a free and appropriate public education. Section 504 defines discrimination as the failure to provide students with disabilities the same learning opportunities as their non-disabled peers. And as many of you know, celiac disease has been recognized by the American with Disabilities Act. So the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 defines a person with disabilities as any person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one's major life activities, such as learning. 504 plans help ensure that students receive specific accommodations to support their learning. Students may also require a health plan with the school's nurse based on individual needs, but that's associated and together with the 504. So Tony, welcome. Thank you again. As a former administrator, go ahead and walk us through some of the key benefits and steps for putting a 504 plan in place.
Okay, so now you know what a plan is, and there are 3 key benefits. The first one is keeping your child safe at school, and second is impacting their learning, and the third is the social and emotional benefits that come with their not feeling alone and knowing that other people understand what's going on with them and are looking out for them too, to keep them safe. And I just want to say that 504 plans are beneficial at all levels of academics, including postgraduate, and especially elementary school, I would say, for keeping them safe when children can't self-advocate for themselves. It's especially important to get that in place. Next slide. So to talk about safety, first of all, we know, especially in the elementary school years, there can be a lot of emphasis focused on food and class celebrations. Sometimes teachers like to give candy treats and things. And although there has been a pulling away from that, especially with peanut allergies and other things on the rise, it's still out there. And so the best way to communicate to all stakeholders that have an impact on your child is to have a 504 plan that clearly states what they can and cannot have, and put some practices into place to keep them safe if the class is planning on a classroom celebration, for example, where someone's going to be bringing in cupcakes that your child would not be able to enjoy. An accommodation would be to notify you 7 days beforehand so that you could provide a safe alternative. So elementary years, there's sharing of food. Of course, we talked about the celebrations. There's class projects. Flour is very inexpensive. They make paper mache, Play-Doh. I've seen teachers make DNA sculptures out of pretzels or Twizzler sticks with marshmallows, culinary class. So there's different opportunities for gluten exposure. Meals at school, class trips. I know as a school counselor, I was responsible for like 7th grade field trip, 8th grade field trip, where we go to Washington, D.C. and Tallahassee, overnight trips. And, we would coordinate and call restaurants and make sure that there were meals for myself and the student. So it's a lot to navigate, but easier to do when everyone's aware. So next slide, please. The second individual benefit after safety is, of course, learning. That's why they're at school, right? They're making friends, they're learning, they're developing and growing. But sometimes if a student is exposed to gluten, they could have different symptoms, as you know, like brain fog, fatigue. They might miss school or have to make frequent stops for the restroom. And so a 504 would provide some accommodations to meet those needs for the student. For example, additional time for tests. If a student's having to take frequent breaks or they can't focus on an exam or a project, then it's reasonable. They need additional time. Also, small group testing is another accommodation that can be offered for students. And the purpose behind that is now, we have a lot of testing. Based on what state you are, there's different ways that you go about, but sometimes we're testing students in a cafe or a large gymnasium, and only one or two people are allowed to use the restroom at a time. So students with celiac really need to be in a small group environment for standardized testing. And what's important to note is students who receive accommodations in the class can also receive those accommodations outside of school for high stakes exams such as the ACT, SAT, or other standardized or placement exams. Usually what happens with that, though, is the 504 contact person talks to the testing coordinator, and the testing coordinator lets ACT, SAT know that a student needs accommodations. Okay, next slide. And last but not least, certainly because this is their home away from home, the social emotional benefits that come with having a 504 plan. When teachers and staff are aware of your child's specific needs, they're educated about celiac disease, they understand cross-contamination, your child may feel less anxious because they know that other people are looking out for them too. And they might have a hard time, especially at the younger years, standing up for themselves. They want to fit in so much and not be different or stick out. And so if teachers and school staff are there to support them and they're on board and they don't have to make an issue and say things, then they'll be safer, they'll be more comfortable, they'll learn more, right? Okay, next slide. So how do you go about getting a 504 plan? Basically, you just need to request it to start the process. So different districts have maybe a little bit different way that they might go about it. Who is the 504 contact? Sometimes it's a school counselor. Sometimes it might be an administrator. You don't know until you look at your district website or you talk to your school, and they will put you in touch with the correct person. But basically, the first thing you want to do is, after you have your diagnosis, get the paper documentation for that. And after you've identified who to give the information to, you're going to request consideration for a 504 plan. And that has to be done in writing. It can be done by an email, anything that you have, like make a little paper trail for yourself. And you just say that you want to initiate an eligibility meeting for 504 because your child has celiac disease, and sign, date the letter, send it to the coordinator. And then what they're going to do is they're going to look at your child's academic records. They're going to look at their grades, their standardized testing. They may talk to their teachers to get some information about what they've noticed in the classroom and what that child might need. And then they're going to call you and set up a time to have a meeting. So basically, what's important to know with a 504 plan, especially, well, in our state, Florida, I can tell you that it's a team approach. You're part of a team, and at the meeting, the parents there, the teachers there, there might be multiple teachers there. And if they're not there, they provide input. The school counselor is usually there. If there's a medical issue, if the reactions are severe, then the nurse would be there too. And basically, this team of people comes up with accommodations that are best for your child and what they need based on their symptoms. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's very individualized, although there are similar accommodations that students with celiac disease might have, such as the additional time or, chunking large assignments into manageable parts so they don't get overwhelmed if they're not feeling well. Those are just a couple examples. So One more thing I just want to point out about the 504 plan. So once you get the plan, usually everybody gets a copy of the plan, and it's reviewed every year. So every year as your child moves up in grade level, there is a 504 meeting. All stakeholders are made aware this child has a 504 plan, and so that everyone's on the same page. And usually those same accommodations will stay in place. However, if you need additional, or he's not using an accommodation, then that can be taken and changed and revised. And another important thing is that when you have a 504 plan, if there's ever a problem, you feel like one of the accommodations aren't being met, or there's a change in teachers. Now, this new teacher doesn't know what my child needs. You can request a meeting, and they'll go ahead and do that too. Okay, so the big thing with the plan is communication in writing. Everybody has a copy of it. Everybody understands what the child needs. And then, you can have a better year, because there's always going to be challenges with every school year with any student. And having a 504 plan can really help you and your child navigate to get the right, best foot forward kind of thing. Okay, thanks.
So Tony, thank you so much. There's been this is a touch point for a lot of people. We've gotten a lot of great questions, not only before the webinar, but coming in during the course of your conversation and your presentation there. So I want to go ahead invite Valencia in as well, to go ahead and unmute and put on her camera, and we'll stop sharing screens here, or we'll stop our presentation. So with the 504, Tony, well, a lot of questions are, our kids been denied for a 504? Maybe they've done a health plan and they're adamant that that's going to be fine, or the school says your child doesn't need one. I mean, what can a parent do in that scenario?
Well, I'm not sure under what situation that a teacher might say they don't need it, maybe just based on what they've seen. But the big thing with the celiac disease, I think this is about educating the teachers. They may not see the need for it at the moment because the child hasn't been exposed to gluten. So, and they're not experiencing those symptoms. But I think once they're educated and they understand this is what can happen, then they would go forward with the 504 plan. And one thing to know, like, let's say you get the 504 plan, you haven't been experiencing any symptoms, or excuse me, you're determined eligible. You can be eligible for a 504 plan and it just not be implemented. But then if you are experiencing symptoms or that changes, then they would put a plan into place. So I've seen that happen too. Sometimes people are determined eligible without a plan, and then if something happens, they get the plan.
Mhm.
And they've already gone through the process to make it a little faster.
So if you have all the proper documentation, like you've indicated, you have this, and one of the questions that came in was the team at the person's school went through the 504 for four questions, I'm sorry, and the child didn't qualify because of no symptoms. That can't be done if they have the doctor's orders that this has been diagnosed, correct?
No, yeah, they can't be denied. It is a disability that is recognized, so they cannot be denied a 504 plan.
Okay, okay.
So that
And
would be where they would have to refute it. And at that point, they would go to, most districts have a 504 coordinator. They would have to go then up to the next person,
okay.
work their way
So
up.
somebody did ask a question. It's just, and I never thought of this, but it's a good question. Does the plan cost the district any money? Is that
No.
something that this person who wrote in, they said, I'm kind of worried we're going to get pushback from the district if I ask for this. But is there money involved with this other than the changes they'd have to make in the classroom or to accommodate the child and the learning?
I don't think there's money, but I will say this. I know that if there are, and this is not a reason why someone should get it or not get it, but if there are multiple students that have plans for different reasons, it can be very difficult for teachers to manage that. Like I've had years before I would have 300 students at the middle school, 400 at the high school, and I might have 3 to 5 504 students, that's very easy for me to monitor and connect with teachers. One year I had 25. That was very challenging. And so I think sometimes it ebbs and flows. They try and crack down on it, making sure that someone doesn't get it if they don't really need it, kind of thing.
Mhm.
But celiac disease is where you would really need it. Yeah.
So how does this differ from an IEP?
Okay, so an IEP is an individualized education plan, and that is for a student that has some learning disability or struggle, and they may receive additional support services during the day to teachers or mentoring or whatnot. And that's different than a 504 plan, because a 504 plan, the barrier that could be to learning is just the disease and the
Mhm.
symptoms of the disease after gluten exposure. So this has been handled differently, I think, in different districts, but usually in our district, if a student has an IEP and they're already receiving services, they don't receive a 504 plan, but the accommodations that they would be given in the 504 plan are addressed in their IEP. So it's still met, they're still monitored, it's still a legal document saying this is what the student needs. It's still covered. Yeah.
Okay. So how does that work? So somebody had written in and said their daughter had an IEP already set up for academic needs
Mm-hmm.
because of ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the discussion they've heard is about adding to the 50 to the IEP, but do they have to have a separate 504 for this than they have set up already for other factors?
No, they don't have to have a separate 504. They would
Okay.
have they could request an IEP meeting, and usually those are done yearly also, and they have reviews. They could request an IEP meeting to address the celiac disease and the accommodations that they may, if they have attention deficit, they may already be receiving the accommodations that they would already for, but they can request a meeting, an IEP meeting.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
Valencia, Jen, welcome both of you into the
Mhm.
conversation as well. Um, t- can you give me, like, Valencia, Jen, either one? I'd like to hear from both of you. You know, the experience with your school system. I know Valencia being a teacher and having your children have to go through this. You know, has the
Mhm.
504 plan been something that's been a smooth process for you? Have you seen hangups, and especially with you, Valencia, in teaching students, and you, Jen, you know, you have a new student who is by herself in terms of when she was initially diagnosed. How hard is that to come into a school district and say she needs a 504 for celiac disease if she's the only one? So I'll leave it to Valencia. Let's go with you first in terms
Okay.
of what you've seen in your school district.
Well, luckily for me, I am a teacher. So pushback that normal parents would probably get, I will not get because I know how to advocate for my children and I know the law. I mean, it's a legal document. And that's why some of the schools probably are trying to tell you to do just a health plan because they know that this is a legal document. And if something happens to your child, on one of these field trips or wherever, the school is liable. So that's probably why they are saying, oh, let's just do a health plan. But the 504 plan, my children had the celiac disease and other illnesses, asthma, eczema. My daughter is wears hearing aids. So from elementary, I've always been in this 504 IEP space. But for the celiac, when the child misses school because they ate something, that's when I think it was most important for me because of the getting the work that they needed to make up, if they were in the hospital because they ate something. That is the major thing for me, as everything, making sure they're safe at school. But when they got to the point where they were missing a lot of school
Mhm.
because of this, that 504 ensured that I got everything I needed. And there was no discussion of anything, as it related to them missing work, missing school, having the time to redo work and get things in. And
Mhm.
that is why you have to fight because it's a legal document. You
Yeah.
cannot let them tell you, but every school district is different and they're going to try to push this so that they don't have to do the work. That's the bottom line. They don't want to have to do the work.
Yeah. So Jen, in terms of your daughter, again, she was new to the, I guess when she was diagnosed, she was the only one in her class. How was that process and setting up a 504 with that school system?
It was absolutely challenging. They definitely gave me pushback trying to send me to the nurse's office to set up a health plan. In my mind, I didn't know what to expect. I had a new diagnosis. I had a child with a stomach ache who missed about 3 weeks of school. So they were already kind of annoyed with me, I think, to begin with. There was no precedent set by other parents setting up 504 plans, at least not in recent years. So to them, they were like, oh, I know this kid with celiac disease. She doesn't have a 504 plan. Why do you need one? And I wanted to insulate my child from further troubles. First of all, making sure she's safe, as you mentioned earlier in your slides, making sure the curriculum doesn't introduce gluten without my knowledge, for example, in art class or in science projects. So we can kind of get ahead of that. I didn't ask for a whole lot, but there's a lot on paper, if that makes any sense. So I wasn't really asking them to put in effort. I asked them to protect me. For example, if my child wanted to go to the bathroom, which we didn't know if that would ever come up as an issue. But if she wanted to, she can just go. She has to be able to wash her hands when she wants to. All of those things that they might just say, no, 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 just use hand sanitizer. We don't have time. Let's get to the next thing. So they definitely they didn't see the justification initially. So I had to push.
And I think that's what we're seeing, not only with the questions we received then, but this is the conversation that people are chiming in on the question and answer session over here on the button. And they're like, my school's pushing back. My school says, I'm a nurse and I have 2 kids and we don't need this. I mean, what's the parent's rights in that situation? I mean, they're advocating for their child in that point. This is a document that has to be accepted by that school, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's all it comes down to. They have to accept it.
They have to accept it, and they also have to train their staff about the allergies, especially they just have to do it. They don't have a choice. And you as a parent has to make sure you got to stay on them. And teachers are really, especially in the elementary, I had some great teachers in elementary. It's that one teacher that child is with all day long, and they learn what's going on with your child, and they want your child to succeed, and they don't want to see your child sick. So most times the teacher will help in the process as well. The teacher can urge the administration, come on, we really need this child. We got to do right by this child.
Yep. So just one more question, then we're going to turn the mood of this around. I know we're talking about 504s and the seriousness of it, but going back to school is a fun thing. So we have to make sure that we touch on some of the fun stuff too. Private schools, 504, it doesn't matter if it's a public or a private school, or am I wrong in that thinking? Anyone? No?
Well, if private schools are receiving some funding too, yeah, they have to recognize and follow the 504 plan. They may not have a 504 contact. They may not be trained in the 504. Now that's a whole other issue. I was a private school counselor for a while, and I was the first one they ever had. And fortunately, I'd had counseling experience that I would do the 504 and all of that, but they might just not be educated and have, there has to be some training that goes on with that.
I think that's the key word, education. There has to be that education of, this is what this is for. This is how my student is affected by this scenario. And I think, it's hard because, as we know, celiac disease has so many symptoms to it. People, we like to call it the gluten. We only have one treatment. It's a gluten-free diet for it. And so rather than gluten-free diet, we call it a gluten-free treatment. That's something that, I think we should kick around, because I think that puts it more perspective of what needs to be done for those kids. So again, it's an advocate thing, and people should know what a 504 is, but it does differ in many ways than the health plan and other things that they can put into place. So question then, what's the most ideal time then to talk to the administration or your teachers about, do you do it before the school starts? Do you before that first week? That first week, I know it's probably crazy, Valencia, you can probably chime in on that, but what is that, what's that ideal time to get that in place for somebody? Or from experience, what have you all done for your kids?
I started my stuff in the summer months when it's not so busy, because it just, and once, like Tony said, once you get it started, it just year after year after year, you'll have to just have the annual meeting. But reaching out to the school in the summer months, and I know they have different hours, like our school district is closed on Fridays, and you got to be persistent, people. You cannot let them tell you what's best for your child. Only you know what's best for your child. So reaching out during the summer, and you can get that district person most times who does the 504 plans. And yeah, reach out ahead of time. Don't wait. If you've not done it, but do it. Do it as soon as possible. And it may take a little while because of the beginning of the school year. So, but yeah.
Jen, when was your daughter diagnosed? What time of year? Was she in school when she was diagnosed?
She was diagnosed in May.
Okay.
So we pursue the 504 until the summer. And
Okay.
it was what Valencia was saying. The schedules were a little odd. Of course, they said, oh no, call us back at the end of August. And so I immediately sent an email. So they have everything in writing, and they know I'm going to be a thorn in their side, because I want her to go in September with a plan.
Yeah. So in that scenario too, I know your daughter does some after school activities. What if those started in the summertime? I mean, August 1st, I know like a month before school starts, they start the training for athletes and things like that. I don't know if there's practices and things, so there's not as much travel or things of that nature. But again, it's not in the classroom. So if that's a scenario, I think that's another advantage for doing this earlier in the summer rather than later, because if they do have the after school activities, that could be problematic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I would
okay.
say
So
only the meeting would have to happen though at the beginning of the school year. Like you're not going to have the meeting in the summer because you have to have the teacher input, and the teachers are part of the team to create the accommodations. So like I remember Valencia, she was like, I don't know, first, second week of school, we got it done. And that's important because then you're starting off on the right foot with teachers are aware. So even if you can't get your meeting in till like fourth, fifth or sixth week of school, because they tell the counselors you've got the first 6 weeks of school to have those 504 meetings and make all that contact and set all that up. So they have that window of time, but you could reach out to the individual teachers with the medical information to say, hey, this is coming up, just so you're aware.
So that's a nice transition, because I did want to talk more about the teachers and the education of the teachers themselves. As parents or administrators, teachers, I mean, we cover the gamut here. How much communication is a good amount of communication? I mean, does it get to the point where a parent's getting annoying and you're like, okay, I got it, but the more you know, the better off for the kid?
Definitely the
I
more you
say
know,
I was waiting for Valencia to answer that one because she's the teacher, but I was just going to say but you got to be squeaky. You have to stay in contact. I mean, you don't want to like every week kind of thing, but it's important to check in and stay in contact and keep the communication open. And I think teachers appreciate that actually, because they're not having to think about it and you're doing it for them. You just, do you mind? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to reach out to you and just make sure we're on the same page and everything is going smoothly.
And
So
I
it
think
probably was just me thinking that the teacher's looking at me going, oh, here comes his dad again.
I think once you educate the teachers, they're kind of terrified to mess up. They don't want to hurt your child. They don't want to make you upset. So they'll do everything they can to adhere. But they will make mistakes. There will be something in your 504 plan that says, you need 24 hours notice of a class party or something like that. And you'll realize, oh my gosh, this kid's birthday is tomorrow and I haven't heard anything. And you will have to be the squeaky wheel and reach out.
Yeah. I'm going to put a pin on the party because you jumped forward a question on me. I have that in mind. I did want to ask though, in terms of the schools, are they required to train the teachers? Are they required to let them know this person has a 504 in place for celiac disease and here's what that is? Or is that more, again, communication on behalf of the parents at that point?
I cannot say in my 30 years of 20 years being in the classroom that I was ever trained. it's a training that goes over 504 plans in general, IEPs in general, but it's not specific to celiac disease. So we just know that we have to, because it's a legal document, we know we have to follow whatever the guidelines are, whatever accommodations are set for that student. Because this is a legal document, we have to adhere to it. So the legal document talks about the celiac disease. So yes, in that sense, yes, you get the training because you get the information about what it is that child needs.
Okay. All right, so going back to my pen, let's talk about fun things and things that are fun for kids, and that's the celebrations in the classroom, whether it be birthdays, whether it be celebrating holidays, or whatever it may be. Any tips on navigating, those special occasions in the class, or maybe even a field trip if you have for instance, my son, when he was diagnosed, he was in the 7th grade, and they had an 8th grade field trip where the whole class went to Washington, D.C. And every day they went to a mall, like a food court in the mall. And that's where they got their food. And there was nothing. We looked up this food court. There was nothing there for them. And so we reached out, and actually we'd found some places, we're on some apps finding out where good places for him to eat would be. And we found some places, and we talked to the principal, and they did nice things. I mean, when the principal went to dinner with him one point in time, just him and the principal, or a teacher went with them. I'm sure he felt awkward doing that, but the school did, once we told them, it was special for him, and he didn't have to miss the field trip itself. So how do you, as a panel, how are you navigating those trips, or how do you navigate the birthday parties in the classroom?
Well, my 4 kids, they all missed the trip. But what I did as a parent, and it's hard decisions that you have to make as a parent, but we went to DC together. I took my children to DC. They all missed it. When they got a certain age, we all went together, and we did the White House. We did all the things that, that they would have done on that trip. And for me, that made it better. I stayed with family. I had family there. So, if you stay in a hotel, get a place where you can cook, possibly. I mean, I just did this with my kids. I took them to London, but I had to find a hotel where I could cook, and we had to go to the store to get the food because they're adults now, but they still have celiac disease. So we still have to make these adjustments, even though they're adults. So they would miss certain things, but they understood the severity of the celiac disease, and it was just easier. Now, when I could go to field trips, I went. As a teacher, I could take off, I could go, and that was great. But some people can't do that. And the kid has to just understand that this is for their well-being.
Yeah. Jen, how about you and your daughter?
I always ask to keep snacks in the classroom. So if something does come up, and I'm able to be available to be a room parent, I kind of try to push my way in as a room parent. Or if not, then I have a lot of communication with the room parents. And I try to convince them to have a gluten-free party. And so far we've been really successful. I don't think it'll always happen that way. But I think, again, education, once the other parents understand, they don't want to put your kids in a situation where they feel left out.
Yeah, and my son also had peanut allergy, so that made it even more difficult with the peanut allergy. But these are life or death situations, so you really got to be careful. And
so, Jen, what type of snacks do you provide? What do you give to the school to keep there on the shelf for
them? Usually frozen cupcakes. They'll stay in the nurse's office in the freezer. Usually,
wow, the teachers don't eat them? I'd be all over that.
Well, they stay in the nurse's office. And actually last year, my daughter had a homeroom teacher who had celiac disease. So that was very easy because she loved keeping everything in her. She had microwave, she had a heating pad, she had all the things. So that was very easy. But I'll send in frozen pizza. I've had a teacher warm that up for her. But it's tough because I also set expectations with my daughter, who's now 12. So she gets it that you might not eat at this party. Something might go wrong. Mommy won't be there. That's going to be okay. I'll give you a treat later. And I always kind of promise it for later. Same thing we do for birthday parties.
Yeah. How does she handle that?
Okay.
Yeah.
She, more than anything, she doesn't want to stick out at 12 years old.
Mhm.
So sometimes she would rather not eat anything than eat something different.
Yeah. So at 12, she's middle school age right now?
Middle school, yes.
Middle school. So, okay, so different than elementary, obviously, there, different teachers involved, et cetera. Are there certain things that you've done as a parent differently for middle school / junior high than you had to do in elementary school?
Well, we're going to a new school this year. We had an upper
Okay.
elementary where they did change classes last year in 5th grade. So
Mhm.
that was kind of an introduction, but these people already knew us. We had the 504 in place. This year is going to be a different ballgame because we're meeting all these new characters.
Mhm.
So I plan on especially staying on top of them.
Mhm.
In middle school, from what I understand, we have less access. So there are no room parents, which to me means that I just have to form a better relationship with the teacher.
Which is difficult because you could have 6 to 7 different teachers. And I know everybody can't do this, but when my oldest, who had the most severe case of celiac disease, because he had the peanut allergy, I went to teach at middle school. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go to a middle school. I left the high school, went to teach at the middle school so that I could be there for him. And lunches from home every day, and I was able to make sure I could warm it up and do everything that I needed to do to take care of him. And it worked.
Yeah. I remember I was reflecting back and my wife and we packed my son's lunch every day for 5 years. And we're in a district where I mean, it's a large district. You have to figure there's more than just him in this class because it's like 1,600 kids in the high school. Every day we were packing his lunch. But that was just what we understood had to be done. So I was curious, are there gluten-free options available at the schools, like Jen at the school where she's going to? Do they have like gluten-free options there? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't trust them. I've never asked them to accommodate. She's perfectly fine bringing lunch from home and I'm okay with packing it. So
Right. Nothing that you really want to eat, really.
Right. But at some point too, for my son, I mean, it was one of those things where it was hard at the beginning, but I really wanted to emphasize with him that he could be his own advocate. He could, speak up for himself. He could, I don't want it to seem like, I was over his shoulder all the time. It got to a point where he was able to manage it. Yes, we were there at the beginning, but as he managed it and, he experienced things in school that I heard of at a later time that involved food bullying, that involved him being made fun of. And, that's just part of school, unfortunately. But we didn't hear from him. He handled that himself. He used it as an educational source or an educational event to talk to those kids. This is what's going on with me. So I think it's important too to get the child involved. And so, Jen, I don't know if you've talked to your daughter yet about this new school. Are there certain tips or things that you've given to her to instill that confidence in her to kind of talk about this and be able to speak on her own and be her own advocate for celiac disease?
absolutely.
Okay.
We practice because she goes to a summer camp where they are able to accommodate gluten-free. They do it safely. I have no doubt they'll keep her safe. But there are days today she didn't get a dessert. She didn't get any fruit. So, things happen and, she kind of came home hungry and there's the conversation about advocating for yourself and mom won't always be there. Like mom wasn't there today. And if you want to eat, sometimes this is what we have to do, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think kids resolve in what they can do on their own I think it surprises us as parents. You see them go off and you're like, oh, they can't do that, but you see them do it and you're like, oh, they can do it. I mean, it's a little difficult because you're unsure. This is a new scenario for them. They can't do what everyone else is doing in some situations, but when they do, it's like, oh, okay, they can, and it's like that's fine. They're going to make mistakes, right? We know it's going to happen at some point in time. Again, but you just I think, and I've told this to my kids, I didn't want that to get in his way as he experienced high school, as he experienced middle school, even into college. Don't let that define who you are. Be who you are, and understand that that's something you have to, have in the back of your mind. So.
I just want to add to that point because I remember one time when I had a student with celiac and they wanted to eat sometimes in the cafeteria. And I walked down to the cafe manager because, there was nothing there, it wasn't set up for that, and talked to her. And she shared that her brother had celiac. So she fully understood. And she's like, you know what? It's really hard in this kitchen to accommodate. every day if they're not going to eat consistently, but if you give me a heads up the day before or in the morning breakfast time, I will make sure that I have whatever it is that child wants that day, if it's the hamburger or whatever. And I was like, okay, you know, a little more legwork, but she was totally willing to accommodate. And, you know, the child would do that when like it was burger time, you know,
Yeah.
no bun. It's okay.
So we've got a lot of questions in about if meals are provided for free and if the school is obligated to provide gluten-free meals as well. I'm actually going to bring, there's also, is a gluten-free meal required by law? I'm going to bring Carla into this because Carla does a lot with our legal team, and she's going to be able to speak to that. So Carla, do you want to address that question?
Sure, I would be happy to. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of questions over the years about accommodations regarding meals. Basically, if any school receives any federal funding, the school is required to provide a gluten-free meal. And so that's definitely where the federal funding comes in. And there's questions about charter schools, private schools, religious-based schools. And again, that funding piece is a big tie-in. And so I might just read briefly because of the legalese from our downloadable school packet, which will be in the follow-up email that you'll get after this, likely tomorrow. And it's also available on our website. But basically, if the only, where is it? The only exception, unless it's a religious K through 12 school that does not receive federal funding. Federal law requires public, private, and charter K through 12 schools to provide gluten-free meals to children with celiac disease if they offer meals to their students. So that does differ about free meals, and that, some states offer free meals for all. Some offer it if you qualify. So there's different programs in every state based on cost and availability. But in general, to answer the question though about providing a gluten-free option, and it does have to be a well-rounded, nutritious option. It doesn't always have to be the exact same thing as what everybody else is eating, but it does need to be, so it can't be a salad every day. So people often ask a lot of those questions as well, which is also in the FAQ of that downloadable packet. So that's that.
Thanks, Carla. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks. No. So again, as we talk about meals, there was an interesting question that came in that I'm curious as to what your responses will be to this. I have my thoughts on it, but it's when your kid really wants to eat a school lunch, knowing that it's not safe for them, what can you do? Is there anything that you can do to help that be a successful type of situation? Or is it basically there's nothing you can do, the kid's going to do what the kid does?
I would offer a better lunch or maybe a better dinner.
Mm-hmm.
That we're going to go out to Chick-fil-A tonight or whatever would appeal to the kid to kind of get their mind off of it and make the kind of dangle the carrot.
My oldest daughter tried this, and she ended up having to be evac from the school to the hospital, and she had to stay in intensive care. So I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but that's the reality. And she was in high school. She was a 9th grader, and she knew all of the ramifications, yet she ate something from a friend. And after that, I had no more problems with her, with any of my kids, actually, because it's that serious. So I love what you said, Jennifer, like, hey, we can make this at home together. What is it that you want? We can do it as a family activity. And you can have this when you come home every day for a couple of days versus eating something in the cafeteria that could possibly harm you.
Yeah, you hate that it's a learning experience, but
Yeah.
it is. But one thing that we used to do is we had access to the middle school menus when he was in middle school. And there were options there. And so we tried to mimic that with what we packed for him. So if they were having something that day, it's like, okay, you have this, but this is the safe option for you. I mean, that's something that we kind of got into, but it got to be a little, he got over it. I don't want to say he got over it, but it was one of those things he accepted, I should say. He's like, okay, I got it. But you are going to have those learning experiences. Unfortunately, Valencia, that sounds terrible. I'm glad that she came through that, but that's a hard learning experience there. Yeah. So in terms of what you do, so let's walk through a school day. You're getting your kids ready at home. Let's say, okay, what do you do at home to prepare your kids for that first day? Or if they're going through, it's a new school or whatever it is, what can you do, or what tips can you share that you've done at home to really get your kid off on that first successful step to get to school? Stunned silence from the
Well,
audience.
I would just say make sure they've got food in their belly. So, make sure you're not sending them hungry so they don't make any rash decisions and they can think clearly and, don't take chances or make any unnecessary risks, and they just start off ready to go like everybody else.
Yeah. Jan, your daughter wasn't diagnosed until she was age 12. Now, my children were diagnosed from the onset. Like, they had serious issues with milk, and they just had a lot of issues from birth. So it wasn't a situation where they were used to eating something and then they became, celiac. But so that is what made it easier for my family, because they never had pizza. They never had some of these things. And so we always had the right snacks, the right connection with the teachers to make sure they had what they needed, always, always, always. And yes, they would come home hungry, but everything is always here at the house. I mean, whatever you want is here, and it's always enough so that you can have what you need whenever you want it.
We try to make everything not about the food. How, our society is so food centered. A lot of cultures are. We try to make it about the experience. It's about school. It's about being with your friends. It's about playing your sports. And you'll come home and you can get the treat. But for now, here, take a granola bar in your backpack. And kind of just set the expectation that you may not get to enjoy a lot of good foods today, but you will later. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Jen, did your daughter have, my son struggled because at 12 years old, as a kid, he was like a chicken nugget fry eating kid every single day. And so it was like, and then all of a sudden he had to change everything. And so it was hard on him. I mean, he went through some emotional things that, I hadn't seen from him before. Did your daughter, I mean, how was that transition for her?
It was very tough. We
Yeah.
saw a therapist, and that helped a lot. And we still go through it. She still would rather have the chicken nuggets instead of the grilled chicken on foil in a restaurant.
Mhm.
So, I mean, she'd still rather have what her friends are having. But we just, again, try to make it that it's not about the food right now, where it's about the sport or the friends. And we'll deal with this later, and you'll have some awesome chicken nuggets at home.
Yeah. So we've got them off to school. We got them on the buses, or we drove them, or we did what they walked, whatever they're there. We've talked about what the teachers can do. Has there ever been any issues, Valencia? This might be more for you, since and you too, Tony, since you've been in the school system. Have you ever experienced like a class or a teacher who just wouldn't clean up stuff? Like, if there were snacks in the room, or they didn't wipe tables, there wasn't any kind of washing hands. Is there a way that they could have been educated to acknowledge that, this could be an issue for some people in their classroom? Or how's that handled in a school when a situation like that is seen?
Well, I mean, I think automatically of the culinary teacher where they were making pizza in the classroom and the student didn't take that class because of that reason. But the kids were carrying the pizza out on plates and eating at their desks and other classes, and it made a big problem, so it was just constantly educating that teacher until they fully understood, you know, this is unsafe. You know, we had a student with a peanut allergy, which is not celiac, but very serious. Somebody was eating peanuts in their desk, and then they came in the next period, sat in that desk, and got very sick and had to have that, you know, had to leave and all that. And they didn't even know. We didn't even know what the issue was. And here, so that could be the same thing with the pizza. So yeah, you have some of those things, and then you educate the people. And I just think, like anything, the more we're educated, the more we educate others, the easier it will be.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, when we went on that trip to London, because of my kids' allergies and they're serving food, we were able to board early. And the reason was because my son has that peanut allergy. We needed to wipe down the seats, the tray. They let us board early. And let's treat this like we did when COVID was around. Have your wipes, have things that you need so that you can wipe down your area if you have to. You know, you shouldn't have to, and teachers should be more accommodating and more, you know, aware and sensitive and just caring enough to make sure they're doing that, because this is going to be your seat almost every day. So let's just take care of this really quickly for this student.
Yeah. So we've been, you know, we've gone through, okay, the classroom, we've talked about teacher communication. Would you recommend, I mean, is there a head of, I mean, I guess most schools now have a head of nutrition or somebody who is leading up the lunchroom area. Is that a conversation that, are they also brought into the, if you have your child with a 504 setup, are they also brought into that conversation, or is that something, is that a whole other line of communication that either yourself or your student should do?
Well, I know when I was confronted with my first student that had celiac disease, yeah, I was talking to the cafeteria manager and the head of the cafeteria and all of that. I mean, I think that's something that the 504 contact person, the one who's in charge, not just at the school, but over all the 504 people, they could facilitate that. And most menus and cafeteria, that's all accessible online now. Like, you can see the menu, you can see all those gluten-free options and everything. Unless you're at a private school or a small school, a lot of times that stuff is coded so you can see what's out there. But yeah.
I'm going to bring Carla back in real quick because I know her daughter is getting ready to transition to high school, but I know her daughter's also been very involved with the 504 and her school. Carla, do you want to share your story?
Oh yes. So Olivia, actually, our daughter, she's also 12 and she's going into 7th grade. Our other one's going into high school, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I can't keep them straight sometimes.
No.
At any rate, last year was the first time that we invited Olivia into our 504 plan meeting. And we all found that was really empowering for her. She was able to sit with her teacher, the 504 plan coordinator, who happened to be the guidance counselor, and myself, and I think it was the nurse. And so she was able to talk about the accommodations that had been made. The teachers had been great about it that year. You know, there was a project with flour in the air, and they were able to do the project outside with flour in the air outside. And then they used gluten-free flour for the 3 kids in the class who had celiac disease to do their own project separately, but still being included. So she actually had a great year last year as a 6th grader, and seeing her involved in the 504 plan again was really encouraging. And I think it's important to recognize how much we can involve them in any part of the process to gain that confidence and independence.
Yeah. I'm sorry I got your girls mixed up. Apologize to them for me. So.
Oh, sure. Okay. Don't worry about it.
So Jen, I want to lean on you for a little bit because I want to talk about after school activities. I know your daughter now, what is it that your daughter does? It's competitive cheer, correct?
Competitive cheer. So of course that's private. That's not through the school district. That's another thing. And she's now playing field hockey for school this year. So she will be going on a bus and she will be traveling to other towns and she will be hungry.
Now, do they provide, so I'm going to bring my personal experience. My son played volleyball in high school. And so when they had to do a road trip to another school. They would be at their school first. The parents or the boosters would bring in meals for the kids to eat before they got on the bus and went to another school. And so part of that was, again, communicating with the boosters or whoever was doing the meal and saying, hey, here's an alternative option he can have from that place, and made sure that they understood that. But is there kind of the same thing with field hockey? Do they have like a team meal or a snack before they hit the road?
I'm not sure yet. We haven't
Okay.
got yet, so, but I'm fully prepared to have that conversation or be the booster person if needed. Or show up at the away game,
Yeah.
so.
So I think it's, and yeah, it was one of those things where he was still included. And I think this is the most important thing about this is that I didn't want to isolate him more and say, well, you can't, you just sit aside and talk to your friends while they're eating before the game or whatever, or before the bus trip. And so we made sure that, again, speak up for yourself. Let us know who's going to be the team parent bringing the meal. We can reach out to them if they have questions, or he talked to them and let them know, oh, I can get this from that location. And so he was able, again, stood up for himself, talked about what he needed, and was able to be accommodated. So I think, again, at an age with just going into middle school, that may be a little bit more of a hands-on thing for you. But as she continues to get more comfortable and grow, I think that'll be something that she'll be able to do on her own. So will she do cheerleading in middle school at one point in time?
Probably not in middle school, maybe high school.
Okay.
But the cheer gym, I mean, cheer involves a lot of out-of-state travel. So a lot of weekends away. Given that she's 12, of course, I'm always with her. So that helps a lot, but it's a lot of meals and a lot of the typical travel challenges that we might have with planning meals. And it's just about trying to stay ahead of everything.
Yeah.
Being the one who makes the big reservation and inviting the friends and hope they want to come.
I want to offer one thing that we have not discussed, and it just dawned on me. I taught 10 years in middle school, 10 years in high school. I now teach online. So when I started teaching online is when I was introduced to Tony, because my kids went to the school that she was the guidance counselor at. So, but what was so great was my kids still went to school, but I picked them up early and they did some online classes so that they could eat breakfast at home, go to school, lunch, they can come home and finish their English, their histories at home, because I'm thinking about that, Jennifer, as I'm listening to you and your cheer daughter. We have a lot of students in our online program who do a lot of different things, cheering and whatever. And it makes for a very flexible school schedule. They still get to socialize and be at school, but if it's convenient for parents, because think about what we did during COVID. During COVID, everybody was home. And I don't know if your school district has an online program, but many of them do. And that may be an option where they could split up their day where they're at school for their math, their sciences, their, whatever, and then they're home for a portion of the day. And that has worked for my family the best. We started this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And
I think the thing with that, though, is, again, that's that communication with your school. I mean, you go in and make sure, they might not want to make that accommodation, and that's fine. That's up to them. But if there are things that they can do, then hopefully they'd be open to that. But just, again, talking that through. And when you were talking there, Valencia, I was like, oh, what about the social aspect of this? So I'm glad you touched on that, because I think in that scenario, I think that's what a lot of kids lost during COVID, obviously,
right.
Online learning, is you lose that interaction that they have and that opportunity to be young and be a kid. So
it wasn't a full day. It was just like a couple of periods towards the end of the day. It wasn't a full, online. They can take some classes online and some classes at school. Yeah.
So, okay. I do want to touch on, and I'm going to touch on this because there's been questions that come in about how does your teen, are there new tips for your teen when going to college for the first time? And I'll share, our experience with my son. For him, so we toured around different places, and we were understanding that, there might not be accommodations at the school that were great, but if they had something, and some schools were better than others. I mean, there was one school we went to that honestly, we looked at the gluten-free menu, and I can't make this up. The first day was chicken and rice, and then they had the next day rice and chicken, and then chicken and rice. And it's like, by changing the order doesn't mean it's not a different meal. So we're like, no, that's not going to be the one for him. But we had to remember something when going to college. A lot of the kids live in dorms and rely on the food from the cafeteria or the food services for 2 years. And then for another 2 years, they might live on their own. So for us, we had to remember, if he's going to be living out on his own for 2 years, there needs to be restaurants, there need to be grocery stores, there need to be things that he can access. Now, things have changed since then because Amazon is such a big thing. You have food delivery services, you have a whole, the future of food is different than what it was. But those are certain things you have to think about as like outside of the food service. And if the food service has gluten-free options or allergy options or whatever, great. And as long as you can find those across campus, that's wonderful. But thinking outside of that, because they're not going to spend all their time in the dorm, they're not going to spend all their time in the classroom. So I think the tip that I wanted to share that I think was most helpful for us was, again, look at the community outside of the college itself and see, are there things outside of there that he would be that student would be able to go to with friends, or they wouldn't feel like, oh, I can't go there or whatever. They might go and feel left out still, but make sure there are some places where they can get groceries, where they can pick things up, and feel safe if they can have that in their dorm room. So,
and Chris, let me piggyback on that. My oldest, who has the celiac and the peanut allergy, we use the same 504 plan. We use everything. When he was getting his dorm, it was only 2 people. Instead of them being in a quad where it's 4 people and the shared kitchen space, we use that information and the doctor's note to show that he has this issue, and it was just 2 of them. He had his own room, his own bathroom, and he had his kitchen. His roommate understood. And from then he became an RA, residential assistant. So then he had his own room with a kitchen. So those are things that you can think about in the future, because it takes time to find that, but it's available, and you use the same legal documents to get access when they're in college. Yes, and it perfect.
That was one of the things that he went to. So he shared a room with people. He didn't have a kitchen but he became a junior. So in his defense, he's a great kid. He's getting his master's degree in food science right now. He's taken what has affected him and he's turning it into something that he's going to be able to utilize. But when he first moved to his apartment with 4 other guys and they all shared a kitchen, and whenever I came over and I saw all these pans and dishes and everything, I'm just like, he's okay. He's an adult. He's going to navigate this. But as a parent, you're always like, okay, as we talked about earlier, it's hard to let them kind of fly. But that was a very difficult thing. But he did it. He did well. So it was. But you're always thinking about that, and there are accommodations that you can speak to.
And it costed us a little more money to have him in the 2, but it was worth it because of what you just described. Too many people, too many allergens.
Yep, you just need to, and most colleges, you just need to go to the disability office and present, and they'll be able to accommodate you. So, Tony, go ahead.
Chris, I just wanted to add to that. Yeah, you just have to go. So you're out of high school. You're going to be advocating for yourself. They're not going to be reaching for you. You advocate for yourself. You go to the Office of Disabilities. You've got your 504 plan. You share that. And all 3 of my kids are in college, and my daughter joined a sorority, and I can eat there because their cook will like accommodate me. And I've eaten everybody's cafeteria. When you're checking out the schools and you check this out, like you said, the community, you find that there's a lot out there.
Yeah. So we're coming up. We have 5 minutes left. And I know we've covered so many topics that are hopefully helpful for people who have been tuning in. But I'd like to hear from each of you just one tip or one piece of advice for a parent that has a kid who's getting ready to go back to school. I mean, what would you like to share with them kind of in closing? And Tony, I'll start with you. Oh, okay. I don't have to start with Tony. Jen, I'll start with you. No, I'm just kidding.
Always bring snacks. Always have backups.
in
Yeah,
any
like-
scenario. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think Tony said it, so you don't make any rash decisions.
Now, is that and that's for the kid?
That is
Carry
for
the
the
get the back, throw it in the backpack, have it there, ready to go.
kids. And for the parent, always in the car, always in the purse.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go rogue. Sorry, and I'm
Oh,
gonna
Carla went hungry.
yeah, I'm totally interjecting too. Jen, I really think like that should be like the celiac motto for life. Always have a
Always have
backup
snacks.
because I think no matter what we do, because I have celiac disease as well, and coming up on my 25-year anniversary next week for it, and you know, I think that's our motto, right? Always have food, must have food or something. We should make a t-shirt.
We're making t-shirts. Always have a
Okay.
snack.
Sorry to be a
Well,
crash.
since you're on Carla, what is your tip for parents with kiddos going back to school? Because you're going to experience it again here in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, my biggest tip is involve the child, teenager, whomever in the process as much as possible. They gain that confidence, like I said, even in meal prep, they'll begin to experience more things for themselves and get the independence. So that's our job as parents, right? To get our children off into the world so they don't need us as much as we hate that. But you know, get them speaking for themselves as much as possible and getting them to make decisions and involved in the decision making.
And I'm just going to add on to what they said. Everything
Mhm.
is wonderful. Always have an EpiPen. I had to have an EpiPen at the
Mhm.
school for my kids. And I know they're probably how much they cost now, I don't know, because I don't have to worry about it so much because my kids are, the youngest is 21, but they need that EpiPen just in case.
That's important. That's important for kids with those food allergies that have that anaphylactic reaction. It's important to have something there.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yep. So, Tony, how about you? Last piece of advice for us.
Well, I honestly, when Jennifer said it, always have food with you, I was like, that's me. Everybody knows I have food with me all the time. Banana bread frozen in the freezer at the, whatever. I always have food with me. I think that's important for students. I would, say even pack a little sandwich in there. I'd always have like a backup almond butter and jelly sandwich in foil. And I'd be like, I hope I don't have to eat this today. But if I do, and if I come home with it, that's okay too. And then I like the self-advocacy thing. Yeah, teaching them how to advocate for themselves. I would have 504 meetings with middle schoolers and be like, "Where's the student?" "Oh, well, no, he's coming later to school." And I was like, "No, he's part of the meeting. He's part of the, the voice here, the team." So I totally agree with that. So super important to teach them to self-advocate.
Yeah. That should have been the tagline.
And one more thing, and the kids and parents, we just focus on the wide variety of foods you can eat rather than those you can't. It's so many great options. Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna say it should be the tagline for the webinar here: steps for a successful back to school experience. Always pack snacks. That should just be what it is. So,
just because there's been questions in the chat, just to clarify, celiac disease does not require an EpiPen for treatment. I know, Valenta, you meant for food allergies, for sure.
Right. I'm thinking about my peanut allergy son.
Yes.
So, well, again, I thank you to all of you for answering these questions, for being part of this, everything that you've done and that you continue to do to support our celiac gluten-free kids out there. So I appreciate you all being on. And another thank you for tonight's sponsor, Little Northern Bakehouse. Again, you will find an email coming across everyone who attended. We will announce who the winners are, those who will get the gift baskets from Little Northern. And a final thank you again to all of you who attended and participated at this evening's event. We hope that the presentation answered some of your questions. We provided some helpful information to get your kiddo back off to school this year. So please continue to visit our website for materials for future reference. Also look for our social media accounts, updates and announcements for future programs and presentations that could focus on back to school or on kids, families, and even celiac disease. So for our panelists, myself, the entire team at National Celiac Association, I thank you for taking part in tonight's event, and we look forward to continuing these conversations with you soon. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great school year.